So, one of the most important things I wanted to make sure we covered was the topic of suicide and veteran suicide in particular. I think I originally got introduced to you from our mutual friend, Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet. And Tim and I have been talking for a while now about the ways that we could use both of our platforms to create more awareness about veteran suicide. And I just wanted to go back to my interview that I had with my college classmate, Chuck Smith, who's a former Marine Corps officer. His executive officer ended up committing suicide. And coming out of that, he started to do a ton of research, which culminated in a TED Talk, which now has over 2.5 million views. But the thing that he discovered that was just so eye-opening to me is that when you think of the war on terror combined, and we just went through the remembrance of 9/11, there were somewhere between 7,000 to 8,000 fatalities during that period of time that were directly related to soldiers being killed in the battlefield. However, Chuck discovered that during this 22-year period, that if you take into account veterans along with active duty members who committed suicide, it equated to over 150,000 lives. And this was fact-checked by the TED organization because they wouldn't allow him to talk about it if they couldn't substantiate the results. It just seems so dumbfounding to me that it could have this severe an impact and yet not more is being done about it. I was hoping, because you're one of the most senior leaders I've had on this show from the US Army, that you might be able to give some historical precedents and maybe your thoughts on what might be changing.
The numbers and the figures are just stunning and so tragic. I would say that from the time I entered the military back in the 1970s, for a couple of decades, I think the military did pretty well coming to grips with and understanding PTSD. And we can really thank the Vietnam era generation for giving us that knowledge. Then 9/11 hit, and we entered these very difficult, complicated, deadly guerrilla type wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The force was small, and we had to keep sending soldiers and sailors, airmen, Marines back into combat again and again, which was really pretty much unprecedented in our history. And so then we dealt pretty well with the PTSD that was in the force. In fact, fairly early on, there were high-ranking command sergeants, senior NCOs, and even flag officers who went public and said, "Hey, I have PTSD, and here's what I'm doing about it." And the military figured out how to deal with it, how to manage it, how to treat it, and how to keep people on active duty, which I think was really good. Then the next thing that came was waves of depression. And the military, I think, figured out how to deal with depression pretty well. And before you knew it, you had people with depression who were being treated, were taking medication, and were allowed to continue to serve on active duty with the malady of depression, which is very serious. And there's a big correlation with suicide. And then more brain issues came along: traumatic brain injury, survivor's guilt, moral injury. And then I believe bipolar disorder is probably quite a bit more widespread than people realize. And we can go into why I think that. But overall, I think the military has done a good job of taking all of this seriously, pushing resources down, educating and training service members on how to recognize symptoms, how to be a good battle buddy, which is built on trust, how to have conversations with other service members that, hey, here's what I'm observing in you. Maybe it's time to go see a therapist or a mental health professional, which again are now much more accessible than they were 20 years ago. The military is doing a lot to normalize the conversation about mental health. And in normalizing the conversation, they're helping to reduce the stigma, although the stigma is still real, it's too big, and it is a major deterrent of people going in and getting help. So much more has to be done about eliminating the stigma. But there's all kinds of examples of bases and commands who have come up with smart, effective methods to deal with mental health and total wellness. I was just on the phone with Fort Riley, Kansas, 1st Infantry Division yesterday. A friend of mine, General D.A. Sims, he commanded 1st ID, and he had brain challenges during his many deployments. And he said, if I'm ever a commander of a base, I'm going to really do something to make a difference. It's called Victory Wellness. And you can read about it. It's on the Fort Riley website because they've kept it in place. And there was a really good article in Military Times 2 or 3 years ago about the program, but it's good. It works. The troops and the families buy into it, and it's effective. And they've actually got data to show the effectiveness of it. So as more and more programs like that come alive, I think we're going to be in better and better shape. So I think the active force is definitely improved a lot, but I think we still have a long way to go. I do think that the senior officers and NCOs throughout the military have a much better awareness and understanding now than they did 10, 20, 30 years ago. Now, as far as veterans, it's a little bit different of a situation. A lot of veterans leave the military and they do have brain issues, they do have mental challenges. Many of them get into the VA system and they get good care, they get good treatment, and they deal with their problem. They get diagnosed, they get medication, they manage this chronic illness, and they live a healthy, successful life. But many of them don't. A lot of people get frustrated with the VA, the bureaucracy, it's too slow. They may not have a good fit with their doctor or their therapist. And so a lot of veterans walk away from the VA and they say, I don't like it. I don't want to have anything to do with it. And they give up on the VA. And that's a huge mistake. I have lots of parents and veterans ask me, oh, I hate the VA. What should I do? I said, go back in there, get a counselor, and start working the system. Tell them you didn't connect with your doctor or your therapist and you want another one. You want to start fresh with somebody new. If you retire from the military, you get TRICARE for life. So if you don't like the VA, you can use your TRICARE and go to the civilian healthcare system and go get treatment. You can find your own psychiatrist, et cetera. In fact, my son, who's retired from the Army, he's got brain issues. He has worked with the VA and then he's worked with civilians because he has TRICARE and he has the VA. But if people don't get back into the VA, a lot of our veterans, that's their only medical system that they have because they don't have TRICARE. So then if they don't use the VA, then what are they going to do? The only thing out there is to go to some of these really good nonprofit mental health places like the Cohen Network or Headstrong or some of these. They're good, but they only have the resources to see a patient for about 1 month. And you can't fix these brain issues in a month. It takes a lifetime of hard work in medical care. My charge to veterans is to get enrolled in the VA and stick with it. And if you're fortunate enough to have private health insurance or you're retired military, and by all means, go try it in the civilian sector. There's lots of good doctors. The thing about the mental health is that if you don't deal with it and you don't treat it, it can easily lead to broken marriage, broken family, ended career, loss of finances, addiction, homelessness, incarceration, and death. That's a pretty typical path for somebody who is not dealing with their mental health. But on the other hand, if you do embrace it and you go in and get a diagnosis and get on a good treatment plan and stick with it, the chances are very good that you'll live a healthy, happy, purposeful life. And I can talk a little about what I see as the right steps to live a healthy life.